Barber paradox. Imagine a small town with a peculiar rule. There is only one barber, and this barber shaves everyone in town who does not shave themselves. The rule is simple and absolute. The barber must shave all those who don't shave themselves, and only those who don't shave themselves. But here's the question. Who shaves the barber? At first glance, it seems like there should be a straightforward answer. But as you think it through, the situation becomes impossible. If the barber shaves himself, he violates the rule because the barber is only supposed to shave those who don't shave themselves. But if the barber doesn't shave himself, then he must follow the rule and shave himself because he shaves everyone who doesn't. No matter how you approach it, the barber ends up trapped in a logical contradiction. This is the Barber paradox. The Barber paradox was introduced by British mathematician and philosopher Bertrand Russell to illustrate a deeper issue in the foundations of logic and mathematics. On the surface, it's a playful thought experiment, but it actually points to a serious problem. What happens when a set or system refers to itself? In this case, the barber's shaving rule creates a self-referential loop that cannot be resolved without breaking its own logic. To understand the paradox more deeply, let's step back and look at what's happening here. The barber's job is defined by a rule. He must shave all, and only those who do not shave themselves. This rule divides the townspeople into two groups, those who shave themselves and those who don't. But when we try to include the barber in one of these groups, the rule collapses. If he shaves himself, he belongs to the group of people who shave themselves, which means he shouldn't be shaving himself. If he doesn't shave himself, he belongs to the group of people who don't shave themselves. Oemtasoans, which means he should shave himself. There's no way for the barber to follow the rule without creating a contradiction. At its core, the Barber paradox is about self-reference. What happens when a rule or system applies to itself? It's a close relative of the liar's paradox, where a statement like, "this sentence is false," creates a similar loop of contradiction. Both paradoxes show how self-reference can break the rules of logic, creating situations where no consistent solution exists. Paradoxes show how self-reference can break the rules of logic, creating situations where no consistent solution exists. But the Barber paradox isn't just a quirky thought experiment. It has profound implications for mathematics, philosophy, and even computer science. Bertrand Russell used it to highlight a problem with set theory, a branch of mathematics that deals with collections of objects. In the early 20th century, mathematicians believed that any logical statement about sets should make sense. For example, you could talk about the set of all chairs or the set of all numbers. But Russell noticed a problem when he considered the set of all sets that your understanding of those. At first, this idea seems harmless. Most sets don't contain themselves. For example, the set of all apples doesn't include itself. It's a set, not an apple. But when you try to define the set of all sets that don't contain themselves, you run into a problem. Does this set contain itself? If it does, then by definition it shouldn't. And if it doesn't, then by definition it should. This contradiction, known as Russell's paradox, shook the foundations of mathematics and forced mathematicians to rethink how they define sets and logical systems. The Barber paradox is a simplified version of this problem. Designed to make the issue easier to understand, it shows how seemingly simple rules can create profound contradictions when they're applied to themselves. This has practical implications far beyond mathematics. In computer science, for example, self-referential systems can create bugs or crashes. A program that tries to analyze itself might run into infinite loops or contradictions. Just like the barber, the paradox also has philosophical implications, especially when it comes to understanding the limits of logic and language. We often assume that logic is the ultimate tool for making sense of the world, but paradoxes like this one show that even logic has its boundaries. Self-reference is everywhere in human thought, from the way we describe ourselves to the way we construct systems of rules. The Barber paradox reminds us that these systems are not always as solid as they seem. So what's the solution to the Barber paradox? The short answer is that there isn't one, not within the rules of the paradox itself. The only way to resolve the contradiction is to change the rules. In the case of mathematics, Russell's paradox led to the development of new systems, like set theories that avoid self-referential definitions. In everyday life, the lesson is that some problems can't be solved within their own frameworks. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to step back and rethink the assumptions that created the problem in the first place. The Barber paradox may seem like a small, playful puzzle, but it opens the door to some of the most profound questions about logic, reasoning, and the way we make sense of the world. It challenges us to think critically about the systems we create and the assumptions we take for granted. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that even the simplest ideas can contain hidden depths, paradoxes that force us to see the world in a completely new way. Bootstrap paradox. Imagine receiving a book filled with revolutionary ideas, only to discover that it was written by you. You haven't written it, yet now imagine you travel back in time and give this book to your younger self. Your younger self uses it to write the book in the future. The question is, where did the book actually come from? This is the bootstrap paradox, one of the most mind-bending concepts in time travel, where an object or piece of information exists without any clear point of origin. It loops endlessly through time, defying our understanding of cause and effect. The bootstrap paradox is named after the idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, a phrase meant to describe something that seems impossible. In this paradox, something creates itself. It exists because it was sent back in time, but its origin remains a mystery. It's a paradox that forces us to question the very nature of time, causality, and reality. To make it simpler, let's break it down with a classic example. Imagine a scientist in the future invents a time machine. They travel back in time and meet their younger self, giving them the detailed blueprints for building the time machine. The younger self uses these blueprints to build the machine and eventually grows up to become the same scientist who travels back in time. But here's the problem. Where did the original idea for the time machine come from? It wasn't invented. It was simply passed around in an endless loop. The machine exists, but it has no true beginning. This paradox challenges one of our most fundamental assumptions about reality, that every effect must have a cause. In the bootstrap paradox, the cause and effect are tangled in such a way that they become indistinguishable. The time machine exists, but its origin is stuck in a loop, forever recycling itself. What makes the bootstrap paradox so fascinating is that it's not just a thought experiment. It has implications for how we understand time and causality. In our everyday experience, time flows in one direction, from past to present to future. Cause leads to effect, and actions have consequences. But in a time travel scenario, these rules break down. The past can influence the future, but the future can also influence the past, creating a feedback loop where the origin of events becomes impossible to trace. Philosophically, the bootstrap paradox raises profound questions about free will and determinism. If the blueprints for the time machine have no origin, does that mean the scientist's actions are predetermined by the loop? Or is the paradox itself a demonstration of how free will can exist outside of linear causality? The paradox forces us to confront the possibility that time isn't as straightforward as it seems, that it might be a much more flexible and interconnected phenomenon. Science fiction often explores the bootstrap paradox in creative ways. One famous example is the movie Terminator. In the film, a character travels back in time to protect a future leader, but in doing so becomes part of the events that lead to that leader's rise. Another example is the classic time travel novel The Time Traveler's Wife, which plays with the idea of a self-contained loop in which events happen because they've already happened. These stories highlight the paradox's strange and captivating nature, inviting us to imagine a reality where time is anything but linear. From a scientific perspective, the bootstrap paradox is tied to theories about time travel, particularly in the context of general relativity. Einstein's equations allow for the possibility of closed, time-like curves, essentially loops in spacetime where events can circle back on themselves. While this idea remains theoretical, it suggests that the paradox might not just be a product of imagination, but a potential feature of the universe itself. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The bootstrap paradox isn't just about time travel. It's about information and causality. Imagine a piece of information, like a scientific formula or a historical event, that exists solely because it was sent back in time. Who created it? If the information has no origin, does it really exist? This idea challenges our understanding of knowledge and creation, blurring the lines between what is real and what is merely a product of the loop. The bootstrap paradox also has profound implications for how we think about the universe as a whole. If time can loop back on itself, it raises the possibility that the universe itself might be a self-contained system, with no clear beginning or end. In this view, the Big Bang might not be the start of everything, but just one part of a larger cyclical process. The paradox forces us to question whether anything truly has an origin, or if everything is part of an interconnected web of cause and effect. So is the bootstrap paradox solvable? Not within the framework of linear time and causality as we currently understand them. The paradox exists precisely because it defies resolution, challenging us to think beyond our normal assumptions about time and logic. It's not a problem to be solved, but a question to be explored, a doorway into a deeper understanding of the mysteries of time, causality, and existence. The bootstrapadox reminds us that the universe is far stranger and more complex than we often realize. It invites us to imagine realities where beginnings and endings blur, where cause and effect intertwine, and where time itself bends in ways that defy comprehension. And perhaps that's the most profound lesson of the paradox. That even in a world bound by logic and rules, there will always be mysteries that leave us wondering. Paradoxes that push us to question, to explore, and to dream. Catch-22. Paradox. You need to escape, but the only way out is to prove you're insane. However, the very act of trying to escape proves you're sane enough to stay. This is the catch-22, a paradox that traps you in a no-win situation where every option seems to cancel itself out. It's a problem of logic, bureaucracy, and human frustration all rolled into one, and it's one of the most relatable paradoxes in modern life. The term catch-22 comes from Joseph Heller's 1961 novel of the same name. In the book, it refers to a rule in the military. If a soldier wants to be excused from dangerous missions, they must prove they're insane. But here's the twist. If the soldier applies for an exemption, they're showing concern for their own safety. A perfectly rational act, which means they're not insane. On the other hand, if they don't apply, they're willingly putting themselves in harm's way, which might suggest insanity, but also leaves them stuck in the missions. There's no escape. The genius of the catch-22 is how it captures the absurdity of bureaucratic logic. It's a rule that creates a closed loop, trapping anyone who tries to engage with it. And while it originated in Heller's novel, the concept of a catch-22 is something most of us have experienced in real life. Think about job hunting. Many entry-level positions require years of experience. But how do you get experience if all the jobs that offer it demand experience to begin with? Or consider applying for credit. You need a credit history to get approved, but you can't build a credit history without getting approved first. These are modern-day catch-22s, situations where the system feels designed to work against you. What makes the catch-22 so frustrating is its circular nature. Every option leads you back to where you started. It's not just a matter of bad luck or tough choices. It's the system itself that creates the impossibility. You're trapped by the logic of the rule, and there's no way to break free without contradicting the rule itself. But the catch-22 isn't just about individual frustration. It's also a reflection of larger societal and institutional problems. It reveals how rules and systems, which are supposed to help us, can sometimes become self-defeating. Bureaucracies, in particular, are notorious for creating catch-22s. Think of a government agency requiring paperwork that's impossible to obtain without their approval, or a university insisting on prerequisites for a course that can only be fulfilled by taking the course itself. The paradox also raises deeper questions about power and control. In a catch-22, the system holds all the cards. The individual is forced to play by rules that are inherently unfair, often with no one to appeal to. It's a stark reminder of how systems can use logic not to clarify or solve problems, but to maintain authority and keep people trapped. Philosophically, the catch-22 challenges how we think about logic and fairness. Logic is supposed to help us make sense of the world, but the catch-22 shows how logic can also create traps when it's applied without consideration for real-world consequences. It's a warning about what happens when we let rules take precedence over human needs and common sense. One of the reasons the catch-22 resonates so deeply is that it's not just a theoretical problem. It's a lived experience for many people. From navigating complex bureaucracies to dealing with paradoxical social norms. The catch-22 is a reflection of the absurdities we face every day. It's why the term has become a cultural touchstone used to describe everything from workplace dilemmas to legal loopholes. But what can we do when faced with a catch-22? The first step is recognizing the paradox for what it is. Sometimes, just understanding that you're dealing with a self-defeating system can help you navigate it more effectively. You might not be able to break the loop, but you can look for ways to work around it, whether that means finding alternative paths, challenging the rules, or seeking help from someone who understands the system better. The catch, 22, also reminds us of the importance of questioning the systems we live in. Why do these paradoxes exist? Are they the result of poor design, or do they serve a purpose? In many cases, catch-22s persist because they maintain the status quo, making it harder for people to challenge authority or break free from the rules. By identifying these paradoxes and calling attention to them, we can push for changes that make systems more fair and humane. Ultimately, the catch-22 is more than just a frustrating puzzle. It's a reflection of the human condition. It captures the tension between individual agency and systemic control, between logic and absurdity. And while it may not always have a solution, it teaches us to think critically about the rules we follow and the systems we navigate. The next time you find yourself stuck in a catch-22, remember that you're not alone. This paradox has been baffling and frustrating people for decades, and it likely always will. But by understanding it, we can start to see the hidden dynamics at play, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to turn the system on its head. Crocodile paradox. Let's suppose your child has been snatched by a crocodile. You're standing at the edge of a river, your heart pounding, your breath shallow. The crocodile looks at you with its cold, unblinking eyes and says, "I will return your child if, and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next." At this moment, your world freezes. You realize this isn't just a life or death situation, it's a logical trap. No matter what you answer, you're stepping into a paradox. This dilemma has baffled philosophers and thinkers for centuries. It's not just a puzzle about a predator and its prey, it's a profound exploration of knowledge, logic, and the limits of certainty. Let's carefully walk through this tangled web of reasoning. You have two possible answers to give the crocodile. Consider the first scenario. In this scenario, you predict that the crocodile will return your child. If the crocodile plans to return your child, your prediction is correct, and the crocodile fulfills its promise. Everything aligns, and your prediction is correct, and the crocodile fulfills its promise. Everything aligns and your child is safe. But if the crocodile plans to keep your child, your prediction is wrong, and the crocodile isn't bound to return the child. In this scenario, everything remains logically consistent because the outcome depends entirely on whether your prediction aligns with the crocodile's intention. The real paradox emerges in the second scenario. In this scenario, you predict that the crocodile will not return your child. If the crocodile plans to keep the child, your prediction is correct, but now the crocodile is forced to return the child because your prediction was accurate. This creates a contradiction because the crocodile cannot both keep the child and honor its promise to return them when your prediction is correct. On the other hand, if the crocodile plans to return the child, your prediction is wrong, and by the terms of the deal, the crocodile should not have returned the child in the first place. In either case, the crocodile is trapped in a logical contradiction. So what's really going on here? The crocodile paradox is a classic example of a self-referential paradox where a statement refers to itself in a way that creates an impossible situation. It's similar to the famous liar's paradox where someone says, "This statement is false." If the statement is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. The crocodile paradox operates on this same slippery logic where the crocodile's promise collapses under its own weight. But beyond the logical puzzle, the crocodile paradox also raises deeper philosophical questions. At its core, it's about the nature of promises, truth, and trust. If a promise creates a scenario where it cannot logically be kept, is it really a promise at all? And if a situation is built on contradictory rules, can any outcome truly be fair or just? In a way, the paradox reflects real-world situations where agreements are made under flawed premises. Think about legal contracts filled with loopholes, political promises built on conflicting conditions, or even personal dilemmas where every choice seems to backfire. The crocodile paradox isn't just a brain teaser. It's a mirror reflecting the complexity and imperfection of the promises we make and the expectations we set. But let's not forget the crocodile in this story. The paradox also reveals something about power and control. The crocodile isn't just a passive participant in this riddle. It's the architect of the trap. By setting the rules in a way that guarantees contradiction, the crocodile ensures that no answer can fully satisfy the agreement. In a sense, it represents authority structures or systems where the rules are intentionally rigged to maintain control, even in the face of logic and fairness. So can this paradox ever be solved? Philosophers have debated this question for centuries, and the general consensus is no. The paradox isn't meant to have a resolution because it's not about finding an answer. It's about understanding the problem. It's a thought experiment designed to expose the limits of language, logic, and our assumptions about fairness and promises. But perhaps the real lesson of the crocodile paradox is this: not every question has an answer, not every problem can be untangled through pure reasoning, and sometimes the power lies not in solving the puzzle, but in recognizing the trap it creates. So if you ever find yourself face to face with a crocodile offering a deal that seems impossible to fulfill, remember this paradox. Sometimes the game is rigged from the start, and the only winning move is to recognize the paradox for what it is: a cleverly constructed trap hiding behind the illusion of choice. Fermi paradox. The universe is vast, so vast that it contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many of which have planets orbiting them. Given the sheer numbers, it seems almost certain that intelligent life must exist somewhere else in the cosmos. And yet, despite decades of searching, we've found no evidence of aliens, no signals, no spacecraft, no traces of advanced civilizations. This puzzling contradiction is the Fermi paradox, one of the most intriguing questions humanity has ever faced. If the universe is so big, where is everyone? The paradox gets its name from physicist Enrico Fermi, who casually asked this question during a lunch conversation in 1950. The math seems to demand that intelligent life should be out there. With so many stars and planets, even if life arises on only a tiny fraction of them, there should still be millions, if not billions, of civilizations in our galaxy alone. And if even a small number of these civilizations are capable of interstellar travel, they should have spread across the galaxy by now. So why haven't we seen any evidence? One explanation is that intelligent civilizations might be exceedingly rare. While the ingredients for life, water, carbon, energy, are abundant, the leap from simple molecules to complex organisms and then to intelligent beings may be so unlikely that it has only happened here on Earth. In this view, humanity might be a cosmic fluke, the result of an extraordinarily improbable sequence of events. Another possibility is that intelligent civilizations do exist, but they're too far away for us to detect. The scale of the universe is almost incomprehensible. Even at the speed of light, it would take over 100,000 years to cross our galaxy. If alien civilizations are scattered across such immense distances, their signals, if they're sending any, may not have reached us yet, or we may not yet have the technology to detect them. But what if alien civilizations are nearby, and we still don't see them? This leads to another possibility. They might not want to be found, just as humans are careful about revealing their location in the wild. Perhaps advanced civilizations are deliberately keeping quiet, either out of fear of attracting hostile attention or out of a philosophical belief in non-interference. This is sometimes called the zoo hypothesis, the idea that Earth is like an exhibit in a cosmic zoo, observed, but left undisturbed. There is also the unsettling possibility that civilizations self-destruct, rushed before they can make meaningful contact. Advanced technology brings incredible power, but also enormous risks, from nuclear weapons to environmental collapse to artificial intelligence. If intelligent life tends to destroy itself shortly after reaching technological maturity, the galaxy might be littered with the ruins of once thriving civilizations. Another explanation involves the limits of our own perception. What if alien life exists but is so different from us that we don't recognize it? We tend to imagine aliens as humanoid beings or civilizations that communicate using radio signals, but life elsewhere could be fundamentally unlike anything we've ever conceived. It might exist in forms we can't detect, or in dimensions we can't perceive. They might even be here, but we simply lack the ability to notice them. The Fermi paradox forces us to confront not only the vastness of the universe, but also the fragility of our assumptions. It's easy to imagine ourselves as the center of the story, but the universe is under no obligation to conform to our expectations. Whether intelligent life is rare, distant, hidden, or extinct, each explanation challenges how we see ourselves and our place in the cosmos. Some thinkers suggest the paradox has a more mundane resolution. Perhaps we simply haven't been looking for long enough, or in the right ways. Modern technology has only allowed us to scan for extraterrestrial signals for a few decades, a blink of an eye on cosmic timescales. The search for intelligent life may require centuries of effort before yielding results. In this view, the Fermi paradox isn't a mystery. It's a reminder to be patient. Others take an even more radical approach, suggesting that the absence of evidence may itself be evidence of something profound. If the universe appears silent and empty, perhaps it's trying to tell us something about the nature of life, intelligence, or the laws of physics. Some theories propose that the very conditions needed to support life might make it inherently rare or a fleeting spark in an otherwise indifferent cosmos. The Fermi paradox doesn't just ask where the aliens are, it asks what their absence means for us if we are truly. It places an extraordinary responsibility on humanity. It means that the future of intelligent life in the universe rests entirely on our shoulders. It challenges us to take better care of our planet, to protect and preserve the fragile conditions that make life possible, and to think deeply about how we might one day represent ourselves to the cosmos. Ultimately, the Fermi paradox remains unresolved, and that's what makes it so compelling. It invites us to ask the biggest questions about existence, from the origins of life to the fate of civilizations. And while the answers may be elusive, the search itself has the power to unite us, not just as a species, but as beings capable of curiosity, imagination, and hope. Friendship paradox. Why do your friends seem to have more friends than you? It's not just in your head, it's a real phenomenon called the friendship paradox. This counterintuitive idea suggests that on average your friends are more popular than you are. How is that possible? And more importantly, what does it reveal about the way we interact, connect, and compare ourselves to others? Let's start with the math behind the paradox. Imagine a social network, not the kind on your phone, but the web of connections that links people together. Some individuals have only a few friends, while others are social butterflies, connected to dozens or even hundreds of people. The friendship paradox emerges because people with lots of friends are more likely to be your friends. Why? Think of it this way. If someone has 100 friends, they have 100 chances to be connected to you, while someone with only 2 friends has just 2 chances. In a network, the popular people act as hubs, disproportionately influencing the average number of friends your friends have. This mathematical quirk means that when you compare yourself to your friends, you're more likely to be comparing yourself to someone with above-average popularity. And because of this bias, your friends, on average, will seem to have more connections than you do. The paradox isn't just about self-perception, it's a reflection of how networks operate, from social circles to the internet. But the friendship paradox doesn't stop at numbers. It has profound psychological and social implications, especially in an age dominated by social media. When we scroll through platforms like Instagram or Facebook, we often see the highlights of other people's lives, vacations, parties, achievements, shared by our most connected friends. This creates the illusion that everyone else is more popular, more successful, or more interesting than we are. The friendship paradox explains why this illusion is so pervasive. We're naturally more exposed to the lives of the most connected individuals, amplifying the sense of comparison. This can have a significant impact on mental health. Research shows that social comparison is a key driver of anxiety, envy, and even depression. The friendship paradox reminds us that these comparisons are often based on a distorted perspective. Your friends might seem more connected, but that's largely because of how networks work, not because you're less valuable or less connected yourself. Interestingly, the friendship paradox isn't just a curiosity. It has practical applications. In public health, for example, it's used to identify influential individuals in social networks. During a disease outbreak, health officials might target vaccination campaigns or public health messages to people who are more connected, as they're more likely to influence others. By leveraging the paradox, we can improve the spread of helpful information and curb the spread of harmful misinformation or diseases. The paradox also sheds light on the dynamics of influence and inequality in networks. In any network, whether it's a group of friends, a professional community, or a social media platform, connections aren't distributed evenly. A small number of individuals often hold a disproportionate amount of influence. The friendship paradox reveals how this inequality shapes our perceptions, interactions, and even opportunities. But perhaps the most profound lesson of the friendship paradox is what it teaches us about perspective. It reminds us that our view of the world is always partial, shaped by the connections and relationships we have. Just as your friends seem more popular, your perception of other aspects of life, success, happiness, or wealth might be skewed by the people you're exposed to. The paradox invites us to question these perceptions, to recognize their limitations, and to focus on what truly matters. The friendship paradox isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding how we relate to others and how networks influence our lives. It challenges us to rethink the way we compare ourselves to others, to see beyond the surface of popularity, and to appreciate the unique connections we have. Because in the end, it's not about how many friends you have, it's about the depth, meaning, and quality of those relationships. And no paradox can take that away from you. Grand Hotel Paradox. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Find a way to turn the system on its head. Grand Hotel Paradox. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Every single room is occupied, yet somehow the hotel can still accommodate new guests. How is this possible? This is the Grand Hotel Paradox, a thought experiment introduced by German mathematician David Hilbert, and it's one of the most mind-bending ways to understand infinity. By German mathematician David Hilbert, and it's one of the most mind-bending ways to understand infinity. It challenges our intuitive understanding of numbers and space, forcing us to rethink what infinity really means. Picture the Grand Hotel. Every room has a number 1, 2, 3, and so on, and all the rooms are filled with guests. A traveler arrives at the front desk and asks for a room. The receptionist, without hesitation, smiles and says, "Of course we have space, but how if every room is occupied? Where will the new guests stay?" Here's the trick: the receptionist asks every current guest to move to the next room. The person in room 1 moves to room 2, the person in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. This frees up room 1, which is now available for the new guest. Remarkably, even though the hotel was full, it made space without turning anyone away. That's the strange logic of infinity. There's always room for more. But the paradox doesn't stop there. What if a bus arrives carrying an infinite number of new guests? Surely even an infinite hotel couldn't handle that, right? Yet the Grand Hotel can. This time, the receptionist asks each current guest to move to a room number that's double their current one. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2, the guest in room 2 moves to room 4, the guest in room 3 moves to room 6, and so on. This leaves all the odd-numbered rooms, an infinite number of them, empty, and ready for the new arrivals. The hotel accommodates infinity within infinity, a concept that feels impossible but works perfectly within the rules of mathematics. So what does this paradox teach us? First, it reveals that infinity is not just a really large number. It's a completely different kind of quantity. In our everyday lives, numbers are finite and behave predictably. But infinity breaks those rules. In the Grand Hotel, full doesn't mean no more room. And adding to infinity doesn't make it bigger. It's already infinite. The paradox also highlights the difference between potential infinity and actual infinity. Potential infinity is the idea of a process that could go on forever, like counting numbers. Actual infinity, on the other hand, refers to a completed infinite set, like the total number of rooms in the Grand Hotel. Hilbert's thought experiment forces us to confront the strangeness of actual infinity, where our normal understanding of addition, subtraction, and space no longer applies. But there's more. The Grand Hotel Paradox also has profound implications for our understanding of the universe. In physics, for example, infinity appears in theories about the cosmos, black holes, and even the nature of time. Hilbert's paradox reminds us that infinity isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It's a concept that shapes how we understand reality itself. Yet the paradox also raises philosophical questions. If infinity behaves so differently from finite numbers, can we ever truly comprehend it? The Grand Hotel feels absurd because it conflicts with our everyday intuition. It shows us that the human mind struggles to grasp infinity, even though it's a central idea in math and science. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Grand Hotel Paradox is how it applies to modern mathematics. The paradox is rooted in set theory, a branch of math that explores collections of objects. Mathematicians like George Cantor, who pioneered the study of infinity, showed that there are different sizes of infinity. The set of whole numbers, for example, is infinite, but it's smaller than the set of real numbers, which includes fractions and decimals. The Grand Hotel illustrates one of these infinities, known as countable infinity, where you can list all the elements in a sequence, like the rooms in the hotel. The paradox even connects to practical problems, like computer science. Algorithms that deal with infinite processes, like searching through massive data sets, often rely on principles similar to the Grand Hotel. By breaking infinite problems into manageable steps, We can apply the logic of Hilbert's Hotel to solve challenges in technology and beyond. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Grand Hotel Paradox is how it challenges us to think differently. Infinity is a concept that defies common sense, but it's also a gateway to deeper understanding. It forces us to question our assumptions and explore ideas that stretch the limits of imagination. The Grand Hotel Paradox may seem like a quirky mathematical puzzle, but it's a profound exploration of the nature of infinity. It shows us that the universe and even reality itself is far stranger and more complex than we often realize. And in the process, it reminds us that some questions don't have simple answers, but they can still open the door to endless possibilities. Hedonism paradox. What if the harder you chase happiness, the further away it gets? This is the hedonism paradox, a fascinating and counterintuitive concept that challenges our most basic assumptions about pleasure, happiness, and the pursuit of a meaningful life. At its core, the paradox reveals a strange truth. When you make pleasure your ultimate goal, it often eludes you. But why does this happen, and what does it teach us about the nature of happiness? Let's start by unpacking what hedonism means. Hedonism is the philosophical idea that pleasure is the highest good, the ultimate purpose of life. On the surface, it seems logical. After all, who doesn't want to be happy? Whether it's enjoying a delicious meal, listening to beautiful music, or spending time with loved ones, pleasure is a universal human experience. Hedonism suggests that we should delicious meal, listening to beautiful music, or spending time with loved ones. Pleasure is a universal human experience. Hedonism suggests that we should maximize these experiences to lead the best possible life. But the hedonism paradox turns this idea on its head. It suggests that the more you focus on pleasure as an end in itself, the harder it becomes to attain. Imagine this. You're at a party, determined to have the best time ever. You carefully plan every detail. What to wear, who to talk to, and even what you'll eat and drink. But as the night goes on, you find yourself constantly evaluating whether you're having fun. You compare your experience to others, worry that you're not doing enough, and end up feeling disappointed. The more you try to force happiness, the less you enjoy yourself. This is the hedonism paradox in action. It's not that pleasure is bad, it's that fixating on it can backfire. The paradox occurs because happiness is often a byproduct of other activities, not something you can achieve directly. When you focus too much on being happy, you become overly self-conscious and start analyzing your feelings. This self-awareness creates pressure and anxiety, making it harder to relax and enjoy the moment. In psychological terms, this is known as the paradoxical effect. By focusing too much on the outcome, happiness, you lose sight of the process, which is where true joy often resides. Philosophers and psychologists have explored this paradox for centuries. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously wrote that happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as a result of living a meaningful life. Frankl's idea suggests that when we shift our focus away from chasing pleasure and toward engaging in meaningful activities, happiness tends to follow naturally. This aligns with modern research in positive psychology, which shows that people who prioritize purpose and connection over pleasure often report higher levels of life satisfaction. But the hedonism paradox doesn't mean that pleasure is unimportant. It highlights the need for balance. Pleasure is a vital part of life, but it's best experienced indirectly. For example, think about a hobby you love, painting, hiking, or playing music. When you're fully immersed in the activity, you're not thinking about how happy it's making you. You're simply enjoying the experience. Paradoxically, this lack of focus on happiness often leads to deeper and more lasting joy. The paradox also raises important questions about modern society. We live in a culture that constantly encourages us to seek happiness through consumerism, social media, and self-help advice. Advertisements promise that the right car, vacation, or gadget will make us happy. Social media bombards us with curated images of other people's seemingly perfect lives, fueling the idea that happiness is something we should always be chasing. But the hedonism paradox reminds us that this constant pursuit can be self-defeating. It challenges us to rethink what it means to live a fulfilling life and to resist the pressure to measure our worth by how happy we appear to be. So how can we escape the trap of the hedonism paradox? One approach is to focus on intrinsic goals rather than extrinsic ones. Intrinsic goals are things we value for their own sake, like personal growth, relationships, and creativity. Extrinsic goals, like money, status, or appearance, are often pursued because we think they'll bring us happiness. Research shows that people who prioritize intrinsic goals tend to be happier and more fulfilled because they're not chasing external validation. Another strategy is to cultivate mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment. Mindfulness helps us let go of the constant need to evaluate our experiences and instead allows us to simply enjoy them. By focusing on what we're doing rather than how it makes us feel, we can break free from the self-consciousness that fuels the paradox. The hedonism paradox also invites us to embrace the full range of human emotions. Happiness is just one piece of the puzzle. Life is made up of highs and lows, joy and sorrow, excitement and boredom. By accepting all of these experiences as part of the human condition, we can find a deeper sense of peace and contentment. Paradoxically, when we stop trying so hard to be happy, we often find that happiness sneaks up on us when we least expect it. In the end, the hedonism paradox isn't just a puzzle about pleasure. It's a profound lesson about how to live. It teaches us that happiness isn't something we can grab or hold on to. It's something we discover in the act of living fully and authentically. It reminds us to shift our focus from chasing happiness to creating a life that's rich with meaning, connection, and purpose. So the next time you feel the pressure to be happy, remember the lesson of the hedonism paradox. Let go of the chase, immerse yourself in the moment, and trust that joy will find you in its own time. After all, happiness is less about where you're going and more about how you're traveling. And sometimes the best way to find it is to stop searching and simply live. Paradox of choice. Imagine walking into an ice cream shop. You're craving something sweet and you're ready to indulge. But instead of the usual 5 or 6 flavors, you're greeted with 50 options. Chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, salted caramel, mango sorbet, Rocky Road, and so many more. At first you're thrilled, but as you try to decide, you start to feel overwhelmed. You second-guess yourself. What if you choose pistachio but miss out on the salted caramel? What if Rocky Road would have been perfect? Suddenly, what should have been a simple and joyful decision turns into a stressful, exhausting ordeal. This is the paradox of choice. The idea that while more choices may seem better, they can actually make us less happy, more anxious, and ultimately less satisfied with the decisions we make. It's a concept that challenges one of modern society's biggest assumptions, that freedom of choice is always a good thing. The paradox of choice was popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, who argued that having too many options can paralyze us. When faced with an overwhelming number of choices, we often struggle to make a decision at all. Think about it. How many times have you spent ages scrolling through streaming platforms, unable to pick a movie, only to end up re-watching something familiar? The more options we have, the harder it is to decide, because each choice carries the fear of missing out on something better. But the paradox doesn't stop at indecision. It also affects how satisfied we feel after we make a choice. Let's go back to the ice cream shop. You finally decide on salted caramel, but as you eat it, you can't help but wonder if you would have enjoyed pistachio more. Even if the salted caramel is delicious, your enjoyment is diminished by the nagging thought of what you might have missed. This is known as post-decision regret, and it's one of the key ways the paradox of choice undermines our happiness. One reason this happens is because of something psychologists call opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we're also choosing not to do something else. When there are only a few options, the opportunity cost feels small. But when there are dozens or hundreds of possibilities, the cost of what we didn't choose feels enormous. We become hyper-aware of the alternatives we gave up, and this makes it harder to fully enjoy the option we picked. Another factor at play is our own expectations. The more options we have, the higher our expectations become. If you only have 3 ice cream flavors to choose from, you might just be happy with what you get. But when there are 50, you expect the perfect flavor, the one that will blow your mind. And if the salted caramel doesn't deliver that impossible level of satisfaction, you feel disappointed, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't perfect. The paradox of choice shows us that more options don't just give us more freedom, they also give us more room for disappointment. Interestingly, the paradox of choice doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Some people, known as maximizers, feel compelled to find the absolute best option in any situation. Maximizers are the ones who will read hundreds of reviews before buying a phone or spend hours researching restaurants before picking a place to eat. While this thoroughness might seem like a good thing, it often leads to stress and dissatisfaction because maximizers are constantly worrying about whether they made the right choice. On the other hand, satisficers are people who aim for good enough. They make decisions quickly and don't obsess over what they might have missed, which often makes them happier and more relaxed. The paradox of choice has profound implications for how we live our lives. In today's world, we're bombarded with options. What to eat, what to wear, what to watch, where to live, who to date, what career to pursue. On the surface, this abundance of choice seems empowering. But in reality, it can lead to decision fatigue, a state where the sheer effort of choosing leaves us drained and less capable of making good decisions. So, how do we navigate the paradox of choice? One solution is to embrace the idea of good enough. Instead of obsessing over finding the perfect option, we can learn to appreciate the choices we make and let go of what we didn't choose. Another strategy is to set limits on the number of options we consider. For example, instead of endlessly scrolling through a streaming platform, we could pick from the first 5 movies we see. By simplifying our decision-making process, we reduce stress and increase satisfaction. The paradox of choice also teaches us a deeper lesson about happiness. True happiness doesn't come from having unlimited options. It comes from being present and content with the choices we make. It reminds us that freedom isn't about having endless possibilities. It's about having the clarity and confidence to choose without regret. In the end, the paradox of choice isn't just about ice cream flavors or streaming platforms. It's a reflection of how we navigate the complexity of modern life. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about freedom and happiness and to recognize that sometimes less really is more. By understanding this paradox, we can make better decisions, find greater peace of mind, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.